Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Are you ready? It's Jeff. Hope you're having a better day than we are here in Maine. Rain today. I heard it's supposed to kind of taper off tomorrow in time there for Mother's Day. I have to go over to my mother's grave there to put some flowers there and everything, and I'm hoping the ground isn't going to be all muddy and wet, but that's probably what it's going to be like. So I have to wear my big boots to go in there. Yeah, that's oh yeah, also today high schools are graduating, the colleges are graduating, so there's a lot of activity going on in town today, which kind of dovetails into what my topic is going to be about in this video, and it's not so much from politics but about teachers. And I saw this video while I was having lunch over at Uno's, just sitting there eating and watching a video because, you know, eat by yourself, you know, it's boring. But so I had this video on, and it's from Teacher Therapy on YouTube. And she has this 22-minute video talking about, you know, the issues that teachers have to contend with in today's society. I think she said she graduated in 2009 or early 2000, and graduated, I think, high school, or I guess that's when it was. I'm not sure which. I can't remember now, but see, I graduated in 90, so... But a lot has changed in just her time as a teacher, that it's very difficult for a lot of teachers to keep up with, okay? Because you know, you have to think about how many, you know, 20 years is a long time for, you know, generation to change. I mean, it's just a lot has happened in that time since she started her teaching career to today, okay? And it's forced a lot of changes on schools that some of the changes have not been very good, okay? And so I'm gonna play this video. It's 20 minutes long, I guess, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss that after we go through a commercial break, and we'll go to the discussion here after that. So let's go to the video here.
Hi friends, this is Trish and welcome to Teacher Therapy. In today's video, I want to answer some of the top questions that I often get from non-teachers. If you're new to this channel, I talk a lot about some of the issues that teachers are having with the newer generation of students, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and just some problematic changes in education as a whole. And the question that I get most often from non-teachers are things like, why did this happen? What are some of the solutions to these problems? And from non-fans, I hear a lot of teacher blaming. They say things like, why are you all complaining? This is all your fault. You guys did this. I get a lot of, you made your bed, lie in it. You planted the seeds, reap the harvest. And I can go on and on and on. And I try to be understanding that if you have not been a teacher, you have no idea what you're talking about. Lovingly. And I want to explain what's going on here. And I can promise you that teachers are not the ones that are responsible for this disaster that we're seeing in society. So I'm a visual learner. I wanted to create an image for you called the change funnel. Now, contrary to popular belief, teachers are not at the top of the change funnel. We are at the bottom. We are impacted by all the changes we're going to talk about today. So a quick overview of the funnel. On top, we have societal changes. Next, we have parental changes or changes in adults. Under that, we have changes in students, kids. Under that, we have changes in education-related laws, which we'll talk about this plenty later on in the video. And on the bottom, we have teachers that are impacted by all of these different changes that are happening. And that makes it very difficult for teachers alone to turn the tide of this ship. I'm not saying that teachers have no impact or no responsibility, but there are many factors before us that are creating the situation that we're in. So let's talk about each bucket in the funnel of change. On the top, we have societal changes. Now, there are a lot of things that would go into this category. There's things like popular culture. That's going to include Hollywood, music, movies, media, social media is huge, technological changes, all of the entertainment that is shaping the way people view the world, and also that shapes people's morals, values, and beliefs. In the societal change bucket, you're also going to see political beliefs show up. And I would say in the last 10 years, there has been massive changes in the political landscape, and also in the polarization and division between people on different sides of the political aisle. There's also a lot of changes in the family. And of course, this has been happening over the span of generations, but often enough changes happen where there's sort of a tipping point or a snowball where it feels like you cannot go back to where you were before. So there's a lot of broken families, a lot of single parents, and that has an effect on children. Now, somehow in the swirl of all of these societal changes, there's going to be changes in people's beliefs, their morals and values, and all of those things eventually impact the way people behave in society. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of negative changes in how people behave. And again, this all trickles down eventually to the classroom. In society, we have largely seen a disdain for authority, for rules, for having respect for elders, having respect for people in general. There's a huge lack of kindness, lack of manners. In a way, what we're seeing is a really, really sharp divide between people. In other words, there's not necessarily a shared morality anymore to the extent that there ever was, meaning that there's not necessarily a common definition anymore about what is acceptable behavior. And I think even 50 years ago, we weren't seeing it to the extent that we're seeing it now. In other words, now when somebody does something heinous and terrible in public or to the public, you have a ton of different groups all arguing with each other about why it was okay or what the reasons were for the terrible behavior, or justifying it or praising it even. And so this lack of cohesion and agreed upon acceptable terms of relating to other human beings is all having an effect eventually on what's going on in the classroom. There's a lot of rampant narcissism and self-focus and just a general lack of consideration for others. And all you have to do for evidence of this is just look at all of the viral videos of how people are behaving in public spaces like stores, airplanes, buses, just basically anywhere where people congregate. It is not uncommon to see people acting crazy. And it's kind of becoming a little bit normalized. And there's just this sort of moral relativism, this idea that whatever you think is okay for you, and whatever I think is okay for me. And it makes it difficult to live in a cohesive society. And so naturally, what we're seeing in society is going to trickle down to the way parenting occurs. As I've talked about in other videos, there is a huge rise of extremely permissive parenting. With many parents today, not all, there is no sense of discipline, consequences, accountability. Parents are often not teaching empathy or skills of kindness, sharing, getting along with others. Just those common lessons that I think we used to learn when we were little. For whatever reason, they are not being taught anymore. Unfortunately, many parents really have a very strong consumer mindset, which they come into schools and different places having this idea that I'm the most important person on the earth, it's my way or the highway, and if you don't do what I want, then you're gonna get sued. And this is naturally going to affect eventually how schools end up dealing dealing with these kind of parents. And there's different problems with parenting. On one extreme, there's the helicopter parents that want to be maybe their kid's best friend, and they're super entitled and they don't want to see any consequences for their children ever. They don't want their kid to ever be told no. And then on the other extreme, there's a lot of kids that are frankly being neglected. They don't have any kind of active parenting. Now, I will acknowledge that especially now, a lot of parents are having to work more than they were in previous generations. I want to show empathy for parents that are genuinely struggling just to get food on the table. That's definitely a factor. However, for whatever reason that the neglect happens, all of that's going to end up showing itself in school once those kids get to school. Many parents are also not regulating their children's internet usage, their iPad usage. So kids are exposed to a lot more than previous generations at a younger age. And going back to the conversation about social media, gaming culture, and the various extreme subcultures that are coming up, a lot of parents don't even realize how their kids are being impacted by this. And a lot of these kids don't have anybody telling them right from wrong. It's also not uncommon for parents to have what I call not my baby syndrome. And that basically means anytime anybody tries to tell a parent something wrong that their child is doing, they're like, not my baby, it must be your fault. And I don't think that that was as common, at least when I was growing up. And again, if you don't know me, I'm an older millennial. And so just in my lifetime, the difference in parenting that I've seen has been astounding. So in many ways, parents are not offering structure for their kids. They're not really having them do anything uncomfortable like chores and hard work. They're not necessarily teaching their children values like hard work, responsibility, accountability, grit, perseverance, all of the things that are necessary for success in one's life. There's been a huge emphasis, probably for a few decades now, on self-esteem. It's all about not making a kid feel bad about anything they've done, not wanting to damage a child's delicate self-esteem, which means in some cases, parents are not even using the word no with their kids because it's seen as harmful and destructive. And many times, parents are just coming into school with an adversarial attitude where they're ready to fight, they're ready for the lawsuit, they're ready to make the schools go viral for the worst reasons, they're ready to get together a mob of parents. There's just a lot of discord, I would say, between parents and schools in many cases. And as you would imagine, that affects how students are coming into school. Since they are being raised how I just described, kids are coming into school expecting everything to be fast, fun, and easy. They have very, very poor attention spans, very poor focus. As I mentioned before, they are extremely anti-authority. A lot of them have no respect whatsoever for anybody that's older because that's just not something that they've been taught by anybody, and they've not seen it modeled with their own parents. Many kids are missing a lot of foundational skills because I forgot to mention this with the parents, but a lot of times parents are not reading to their kids. They're not going over, their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s from a really young age. They're not writing with their kids. They're not doing anything educational with their kids. So I think in previous generations, kindergarten was a support for some things kids already came in knowing, but that is largely gone. As a matter of fact, many kids are coming into kindergarten not even potty trained. Sometimes this is even getting into the elementary school age where kids are not potty trained. And again, this is not putting the blame on kids. It's just reporting what is. This is what teachers are encountering. So as you can imagine, kids have a huge lack of discipline and lack of grit. They haven't had their willpower exercised. And although this is a controversial thing to say, I think kids are very much being fed a victim mentality. Now, before you pick up your tomatoes to throw at me, I understand that there are all manner of challenges that a child could legitimately have. They could come from poverty, they could have trauma in their background, they could have mental health challenges or developmental delays. The list goes on, and those things are real. But I think in previous generations, the idea was the farther behind you start, the harder you have to work to catch up. For whatever reason, in the last decade or two, the philosophy has changed to, if you've got any kind of challenge or situation that puts you behind, the standards need to be lowered for you. You can't be expected to do what other kids do. And that could be a video all by itself, but it is real. So a lot of teachers are dealing with kids coming in and saying, oh, I have ADD, so I can't be expected to fill in the blank. And it's no longer 1 to 3 of those kids per class. Sometimes it's half the class claiming that they've got some kind of something that's preventing them to do what other people are doing. And it's not necessarily like the parents are teaching their students coping mechanisms, skills, and strategies, because that is not a problem. We encourage that. It's the idea that I just can't be expected to do it, so I won't. With all of this chaos, there's also a lot of inappropriate behavior that students are coming into the classroom with, whether it is cursing teachers and peers out, violence, complete rebellion and insubordination. The list goes on, but there's been a huge increase in students that are just causing chaos in the classroom. And it's starting younger and younger. Kindergarten teachers, preschool teachers, 1st through 3rd grade teachers are now seeing the behaviors that often didn't show up until middle school in the past. So again, the point of all of this so far is to show that all of these things are funneling down and affecting teachers. So now our next category is, let's call it school laws, policies, rules, regulations, expectations, whatever you want to call it. It's basically the rules that teachers have to follow or they will be fired. I will include in this category mandated curriculums, mandated teaching strategies, basically things that teachers do not have an option to opt out of. And I think this is the key category that non-teachers do not understand. And to be honest, I did not understand it before I became a teacher, because when I went to school, I genuinely think teachers had a lot more freedom to choose aspects of the curriculum, to choose teaching strategies, to run their classroom essentially. But somewhere between when I graduated from high school in 2005 to when I started teaching in 2013, something must have happened, because by the time I got in the classroom, it was a cold bucket of water to the face to realize that I really wasn't in charge of my classroom. I had people micromanaging me at all times and telling me all of the things that I could or couldn't do, even if they made no sense to me. And I really wanted to put this point first, because I don't know how long people will listen to the video, but I have to admit that these laws and policies are a response to what's happening in society. So the question really is, what happens on a school level when society is changing so fast, parents and kids are changing? They end up responding to those changes by really creating protections for themselves. That's what I honestly believe. So back in the early 2000s, we had No Child Left Behind from George W. Bush. Later on, we had Obama's letter to schools. We had Common Core. We've had all of these somewhat radical changes to education that teach by. And if we say, no, I don't agree with this, we get fired. That is as simple as it is. And honestly, this could have its own funnel of change, because of course, at the top, we've got the federal government, then we've got state governments, we have local governments, then below that, we're going to have our actual school district. They're all coming up with their own rules and policies and curriculums. Then that funnels down to the building and your building principal and your instructional coach. Then again, at the very bottom of this change funnel are teachers that have to follow these rules or be fired. So as a summary of a lot of the really disturbing changes that I've personally seen in education since I became a teacher in 2013 include things like no discipline for students no matter what they do, or it being nearly impossible for a student to get consequences. So discipline's in its own category. And there's things like PBIS and restorative practices and all of those things that I've talked about in other videos. Then we have changes in how students are graded. So there's been huge movement across the country to get rid of zeros. I sat through a professional development where the leader stood up and said that zeros are toxic and that every student, no matter what, should get a 50 even if they turn in nothing all year. So we've got policies like that. Eventually, some schools decided that we've got to get rid of homework altogether, so there's no homework. There's been various curriculum changes with reading, which I've talked about a lot on this channel, but things like we cannot have students read a class set of novels together. They can only do these small, disjointed reading passages from some online anthology or test prep questions, stuff like that. And now, of course, people are finally realizing that phonics are important for kids to learn. But before that, there was the whole language craze and everything that went along with that. Then there's been newer, crazier ways of doing math that made no sense to me whatsoever when I was told you need to teach division in this crazy way where you're drawing 50 blobs on a paper with dots in it instead of the old-fashioned division method. All of these things are, again, changes that are being mandated, enforced on teachers, and we can't say no or we get fired. I think that, I can't say it enough, that's the thing that non-teachers do not understand. So you put all these things together in the funnel of change and teachers are on the bottom. And the crazy thing is that teachers are getting the blame for all of this. As a teacher, it was so common for us not to ever be asked what we thought about the various building changes that were occurring. We're just constantly subjected to crazy professional development meetings where we're being told by some kind of expert how we should be teaching and how everything that teachers have done for the last 30 years is wrong, like giving zeros for missing work, for example. In this newer form of teaching, basically anything traditional or so-called old-fashioned is chucked in the trash, and it's all about these new wave methods that we just have to get on board with. And a lot of that, again, is going to include a response to the parenting philosophies where teachers are sometimes encouraged, like, don't say no to kids. We can't say no talking. We have to say our voices are off. Crazy stuff. And that's why so many teachers are burning out quickly and leaving the profession in droves. It's completely unsustainable for the long haul because in this system, teachers are getting beat up from all sides. We feel beat up from our direct administration, whether that's sometimes principals, instructional coaches, district staff. We feel like we're getting beat up from parents, beat up from students, beat up from society, and blamed by society for what's going wrong. And since our often very small paycheck is keeping a roof over our head, keeping food on the table, a lot of teachers feel pressured to go along with what's happening, or they feel so gaslighted that they second guess their own intuition. I even found this happening to myself a lot. And that's kind of why I started this channel like way back years ago, because I was thinking to myself, I cannot be the only one that thinks this stuff is crazy. But when you are in those teaching type atmospheres, I would compare it to like mild mind control, mild brainwashing, mild to moderate maybe, because you just hear the same thing over and over. You're told how you learn to read, for example, was the ineffective way, and that there's studies and there's research and there's books and there's all of these experts that can verify that this new method is the right method. And so I think some teachers end up drinking the Kool-Aid and thinking, oh, well, who am I? Especially newer teachers, they're thinking, well, what do I know? I'm new to this field. Maybe these people are right. And as the system falls apart more and more, teachers are the ones that are blamed, even at the school building level. We would have these data meetings where teachers' scores for whatever last data standardized test thing was put up on the screen, and we were told to break into small groups and talk about why it was that particular teacher probably had lower scores than another one. So never did they stop and reflect on the methodologies and the practices and the curriculums that they were enforcing on the teachers. They would just blame the teachers. Teachers are always the easiest ones to blame. And that's why I feel so passionate about this subject. I don't know if you can tell or not, but it just really upsets me to see teachers get blamed so often for what's going on. So teachers really just end up feeling like customer service representatives. We're micromanaged, we're demeaned, we're called troublemakers if we push back on things. And teachers are expected to fill in the gaps of the collapse of society. We're now expected to be not only educationally themed entertainment, but also counselors and social workers and data analysts and a ton of other jobs that we can't possibly do, especially when student misbehavior is not allowed to be addressed. There's been another big movement in education where if a kid is acting up in class, the teacher is not supposed to just send them to the principal's office. A teacher is seen as a bad classroom manager if they ever have to remove a student from the room. So basically, teachers are given this impossible impossible deck of cards and told to make miracles with it. And it's getting worse and worse. So that's why when people say like, what's the solution? It is very difficult because I think a lot of people want to look at teaching laws and rules and policies, and I get that. But I think what they're not realizing is it's societal changes, changes in adults and parents, changes in kids that put pressure on the system in many cases to change things up completely. Because when you have a classroom where half the kids are acting up, you cannot suspend all of those kids. When you have kids coming in every single year where 70% of the class is 1 to 3 years below grade level, you can't fail all of those kids. So in a way, schools themselves are responding to what's happening in society. And schools are responding to what's happening with parenting culture and lawsuit culture and viral on social media culture. So it is just a really tough thing to fix, in my opinion. I think people's best bet is to see if they can find or form smaller communities where there's an agreed upon set of values and expectations, where they agree on discipline practices. And that can happen sometimes in private schools and charter schools. I think it's getting a lot harder to find that in public schools. Of course, there's homeschooling. If people are able to homeschool, I'm a huge advocate for homeschooling. Co-ops where parents help each other out and rotate in groups to work with their students. There's online school where parents can maybe have some kind of curriculum to work off of, but they can help and monitor their child's progress and success. But I get that that's really hard with a lot of the financial pressures that a lot of parents are dealing with. But I would love for you to let me know in the comments, what do you think are the solutions to these problems, especially when they appear to be starting at the society level and trickling all the way down to what's happening in teachers' classrooms. So I know that was a lot. I have just been having this video idea on my mind forever. And I was like, I'm just gonna get it out there and we'll see what happens. And maybe I could make smaller videos addressing different questions or honing in more on any of the topics that I brought up today. But by all means, let me know if there's something specific you would like me to go into more depth on. And if there's any other video topics you want to hear about, let me know in the comments too. I just want to say I appreciate all of your support so much. You guys are amazing. If any of you guys ever wants to share your teaching story in an interview, you can email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. And I will see you guys next time. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Bye for now.
Let's separate here for a commercial break and we'll come right back.
I'm Alex Curtis. I'm a lobsterman in Maine, and this is me.
I'm Roxy Sugar, and this is me.
I'm Eric Hopkins. I'm an artist, and this is me.
This is me.
Me.
This is me.
This is me.
At the end of the journey, the main thing is you, original.
After my husband tried the salt trick, I let him come in through the back door, and it was amazing. My plumber was over 60, but he left me with limp legs for 2 hours after doing that dirty trick you taught me. That's what my friend told me. Can you believe it? Don't drink salt water before bed unless you want to stay hard all night and make your wife spray like a fire hydrant. Yes, salt. Discovered by Harvard scientists, this 15-second trick has been proven to increase blood flow to the little guy by 342% in over 100,000 men. Forget pills, Kegels, and pumps that only cause embarrassment. This salt trick is natural, easy, discreet, and helps any man be ready whenever needed. As hard as a rock. Your only task will be to use this trick for just 15 seconds in the bathroom and watch the magic happen. It might sound strange, but I'm sure your wife or girlfriend will thank you for this. So pay attention, go to the kitchen and grab some salt. Here's the secret. Adult film stars have been using this trick for years. That's why they're always ready for 2, 3, or even 4 shoots in a row. And now you can too. It doesn't matter if you're 25 or over 60, the famous morning wood will be inevitable. Want to know how it works? I'll show you how to do it the right way. I recorded a free, uncensored, and very satisfying video at home. However, it will only be online today and only for the smartest. If you're ready, click the link in the description or the pinned comment and see for yourself. You'll thank me for this, but make sure to watch with headphones. As I mentioned, the video is uncensored and shows exactly how this trick works to make your partner as hard as a rock.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it. It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
Welcome back. All right, so very, very good video, I thought. I mean, she's got it broken up into 5 parts, I believe, and in each part, you know, she gives a very insightful picture, you know, of what it's like, at least, you know, as much as she can do in a short video, of what it's like to be a teacher. I know somebody who is a teacher. He's a young fellow. and he teaches in, it's somewhere in New York City, but I can't remember exactly where, but he's a teacher there. And, you know, he's said a lot about things that have come up in his career that, you know, it's almost kind of like weird and abstract in the way, the things that he has to contend with, you know, with parents and shit. But what I think, you know, is when you think about all the school shootings that's happened, that really made a big change in schooling. Okay, the security and for having teachers recognize when there could be a danger, and you know what I'm saying. They made the school environment scary. Okay, at the same time, this is going on. You got parents and you got school boards and you got all this shit going on the outside of the box of the school, demanding that teachers do this, do that, do this, do that. You know, trying to correct what they perceive as flaws in how the children are. And it's not because of the teachers that these kids are having flaws, but it's because of the home life they come from. Not all these kids come from decent families, okay? It goes without saying. I mean, not everybody's going to have a good upbringing, but it seems like she said, that a lot of the parents today are very afraid to be authoritarian. And I mean, not like, you know, like a Hitler or something in the house, but to own the mantle of being the person responsible to, you know, teach them morals and stuff like that. Okay, they don't want to be a parent, they want to be a friend. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with being a friend, but you have to, you know, let that kid know as they're growing up. As they get older, you can ease a little bit off of that, but when they're kids, they don't know anything about right or wrong. Okay, they'll continually put their hand on the burner and keep burning it until, you know, they figure out, you know, don't do it. And because unfortunately, even as adults, people have to learn things the hard way, and so it is with kids. They have to learn things sometimes the hard way, but at least the lesson is learned. Okay, but parents today don't seem to want to take the initiative on trying to be there to make sure that that lesson is learned, and they take that responsibility and they put it on the lap of the teacher. Okay, when the teacher has, like she said, we got a ton of shit that we got to deal with to educate the kids. We don't have the fucking wherewithal or the resources to also raise these kids. That's the parents' job. But if we try to raise these kids, the parents will come in and yell at us, because it's so easy to point the finger at and lay blame on someone else than it is to point the finger at yourself and say, I'm the one at fault because I expected that teacher to do my job when I should be raising that kid about how to behave, how to treat others kindly, how to respect adults. Okay, I'm not doing that. I expect that teacher to do it. No, you're not supposed to do that. A teacher doesn't go to college to learn how to do anything more than just teach. All right? Now, we also have a problem with some teachers, not all teachers, but some teachers who, the minute they go graduate from college with their diplomas and they get their certificate, they start teaching, but they're not aware of the line between student and teacher, and they cross that line and they get in trouble. Okay, and I think in some regards, because the frequency of these things have happened, and because of the internet, we're seeing it all the fucking time, right? You know, it's just it's more so than when I was a kid. I mean, you're every time a teacher does something wrong, it becomes national news. So parents today have become paranoid that the minute, you know, a kid is seen in the classroom getting extra help after school, something's going on. Okay, so now the parents are out there being paranoid. They think all the teachers are going to do something to their kid or something. Okay, so you got that going on with that. And I know I talked to some people with parents, and a lot of them have already been talking about pulling their kids out of school because they don't trust these young teachers around their kids. Okay, you know what I'm saying? So in this day and age where people have these, they build these preconceptions about school and about the educators that they have blinded themselves from understanding that, yes, these things happen. School shootings happen. Bad teachers are there, okay? But not every teacher, just like not every cop that's out there is bad, okay? There are lots of good teachers. There are lots of good cops. There's a lot of goodness there, okay? But as a parent, okay, you got to be able to sit down with your kid, talk to them, find out what's going on at school, take an interest in their day-to-day life, okay? Take an interest. Now, I realize for a lot of parents, they're working 2, 3, maybe even 4 jobs, especially for the single parents out there, okay? I understand it's not easy, okay? And I think in some of these cases, they expect the teacher to be the the other end of this parenting spectrum because there's only one. So if they can't raise the kid because they got to work, they expect the teacher to take that job because the kid is there, right? Again, that's not their job. If you need to have somebody to do that sort of thing, you know, you're going to have to figure out another method, okay? Leave the teacher out of it. They're there just to educate your kid. That's their responsibility. If they have to focus on teaching the kid manners and all this stuff, I mean, Jesus Christ. The kid should be in school more than, you know, from 7 to 2. They should be there at least a good 10-hour day, you know, where they need to spend more time in school and less time at home if that's the way it's going to be. Jesus, I mean, if you're advocating your fucking responsibility as a parent to raise your own kid, okay, then these kids need to stay in school longer because that's the only place they're going to get any positive upbringing, basically, because you're not going to do it. You're too busy working. So until, you know, something like that is considered, then, you know, the parents have to be the ones responsible enough to understand, you know, where they need to, you know, take more responsibility for raising their own kids, okay? Now, when I was in school, you know, yeah, there was issues of that happening even back in the 80s, okay? There were lots of single parents back then, too. And a lot of these kids, they would come to school and, you know, sometimes they would be destructive and other times they'd be very reserved and, you know, they'd sit in a corner. Okay, you know, yeah, it's difficult as a teacher to see that, and you want to get them engaged in the education process, okay? But it's a skill that, you know, teachers, you know, they can't spend all their time with just one kid. Especially when, you know, my classrooms when I was growing up, 30 kids in a classroom, that's a lot of kids, okay? That's a lot of kids in a classroom. They can't possibly, you know, focus, you know, all this time on one just to get them involved in education and stuff like that. You have to get the parents involved too. And yeah, parents used to show up at parent-teacher night back then, but we didn't have the strife, at least I don't think we did, of parents being argumentative with the teachers or being confrontational with the teachers. In fact, I think the relationship for the most part between the teachers and the parents was amicable, you know, and I think that with the way things are today and this adversarial relationship that's going on, I think that is, you know, a byproduct of, you know, all the things that's been going on in our public conscience of schools. Okay, and the government itself is kind of responsible for that too. Okay, because you got people like the president going around talking about, oh, the schools they suck and we're low on the education. Negative. Okay, and when people listen to politicians talking about how bad the schools are, what do you think that does to the people's perception of schools? After a while, they say the teachers aren't doing their job. They're lousy. They shouldn't be teaching. My kids shouldn't be there, okay? And, you know, the cycle, it continues. So we have too much outside chitter-chatter going on about schools that's not positive. And we don't spend enough time understanding the intricacies of what it's like to be a teacher in these classrooms, okay? We need to hear more about that, okay? We need to hear more from the teachers as to why it's so difficult to teach these kids. And this video that I played for you shows a lot here about what these things are like. Of course, you can't lay it all out in 20 fucking minutes, okay? You just can't. You have to actually be in these classrooms and watch these things happen, okay? You got to see the kids misbehave. You got to see the teachers getting stressed out. You have to be there to see what before you can open your yap and talk about it and understand. Okay, it's easy to watch CBS News and get the lowdown on a fucking school shooting that happened and then sit there and blame the whole fucking community and the schools and everything else. That's the reason why it happened. Okay, it's easy to do that. Pointing the finger at somebody is an excuse. It takes the blame off yourself. We're all involved. When it comes to children, even the people who don't have kids like myself, we're all involved in raising the child because it's a community thing. It's not just on the backs of the teacher or the parent or something. We're all involved in being examples for kids to follow so that way they grow up understanding right and wrong better, okay? We're all involved in it. So what we do to each other as adults gets seen by kids. It gets repeated by the kids. That gets carried on to their kids. You see what I'm saying? We're a domino effect. So it's a community thing. It's not an exaggeration to say that it takes a community to raise a kid. It certainly does. It certainly fucking does, okay? You know, you wouldn't see that as a kid, and you might not realize it until you're much older. Like, you know, I'm like 53 years old, and I've seen enough examples in my lifetime where the community can impact a lot about how a kid thinks and how they behave in school and stuff. You know, when you watch, you see the kids that are mischievous, and you know, you see where they come from, and then you look at the kids that are well-natured and they're, you know, good, and you see where they come from. Obviously, the community and parenting is a factor here, right? So in order to ease the tensions off from the teachers, we have to do our part. Not just the teachers, but all of us have to do our part to make it right, okay? And we know we can do this because, like I said, when I was in school, when I was a kid, the schools were different. You know, I hardly ever heard of a school shooting, okay? I do remember some kids bringing knives to school, which was a no-no, but I never heard of anybody being stabbed with a knife because I think kids still had a rudimentary understanding of right and wrong. Somewhere along the line, that got lost, and that can only get lost when the parents refuse to educate kids on right and wrong or emphasize something that's not moral or something unethical, okay? Now, you could say, well, that's probably because they're not going to church or something. Okay, whatever. If you think you're not taking your kid to church or whatever, any background so they can learn something about ethics, if you think that's part of the reason, then change it. Take them there and see if it makes any difference. But do something other than bitch. Okay, do something other than just, you know, go to these school board meetings and start raising old Mary hell while you're in there. Sit down, okay, calm yourself, and think. What are they telling you? Well, you know, what's going on? And the last thing you should do before anything else is to talk about cutting budgets. These teachers are working, some of them using their own goddamn money in their classrooms to do things with these kids because the school itself doesn't have the money to be able to help them with supplies or whatnot, okay? Cutting budgets is not the answer. All right? You know, we have such a technological society. You know this. Every damn kid out there's got a friggin' cell phone. You know, they understand how to work things on the cell phone better than they probably know how to do math in school, okay? But the thing is that technology is what gets them interested. So there's no reason why we can't incorporate a little more fun or something in the education process by introducing something, you know, technological in the classroom. Now, where I live, there's technology. We're 40 years behind the rest of the damn country in this state. Okay, so you're not going to see schools that are really modern or anything around here because it's a lot of money. But you're still going to see kids walking around with laptops and cell phones. So there's no way, no excuse really, I should say, no excuse that you can't incorporate something of that in there. You know, like bring your laptops in or something. And we can do stuff. Okay? I have a cousin who's a teacher, and when she's sick and she can't go to school, right? She will still give her assignments out to the kids over the internet. Okay, now I know that sounds like I'm saying this like this is new, but I think for a lot of you people, that's already been going on. Okay, but what I'm saying is this is how you can utilize technology to keep the kids involved. Okay, but you know, at the same time, you have to make sure there's limits, right? Boundaries that they can't cross. So you have to make sure the teacher respects. I mean, the student respects the teacher, and the teacher's there involved to do the job. Okay, I think a lot of times young teachers, when they get in there, they don't know how to be a you know, how can I say it, the person in charge. They don't know how to do that. And when I was in the military, there were special classes for senior NCOs and officers that they could take to build their authority around people to garner that kind of respect. They had to take classes. I mean, not everybody who's an officer can do it, you know, just by, you know, no, they do have to take classes before they, you know, get into any higher levels of rank, so that way they know how to handle their authority and handle it well. Okay, and I think a lot of these young teachers, when they go through college, they need to take classes similar to that, so they know how to keep the kids at bay, so the kids won't ever think about trying to cross the line and say, "Oh, you're my friend," you know, keep the line there. I mean, look, waitresses, okay, even waitresses understand the barrier between the customer and what they do. Okay, they understand the boss tells you you're not supposed to fraternize with the customers, okay, and they won't cross the line. You know, at least they shouldn't. But it you know, like I said, you know what I'm saying? There is this period of conversation to try to show people or explain to people how you're supposed to behave. And I think a lot of young teachers, because they're just coming right out of school themselves, okay, they go into these classrooms for the first time, and they're you know, they're trying to be everything for the kid. You know, a parent, a friend, a teacher, a counselor. They're trying to be all these things, and it's impossible. You're asking these people to be perfect. Okay, to be the perfect teacher, and you cannot create a perfect teacher. Okay, you just can't. But what you can do is ask them just to teach, to educate your kid. Okay, and if there's any issues where the kid's not learning or something, then you bring the parent in and you sit them down and say, "Look, this is what's going on here." Okay, and maybe the parent can pick up, you know, where the teacher can't. Okay, the other alternative, and I'm sure a lot of people would probably consider, is that for teachers who find it too damn difficult to teach in the public system, okay, because like she said, Chris, they're changing the rules all the fucking time. You can't keep up with that, okay? If it's that bad, and if it makes it too hard in order to appease everybody, then consider being a teacher for hire, if you will, okay? There was one person that I knew that did that back in the 80s, and I can't remember now how long he did that, but he was there for a good decade and a half, I think, doing this. But he had a license to teach. He just wasn't attached to a school, but he was a tutor when he wasn't teaching anybody. And hey, I guess he made pretty good money that way. He'd have his name out there, you know, if your kid or something needs a tutor, have them call me or something, and I can come by, you know, for X amount of dollars a day or a month or a week, however how he charged them. And a lot of people, you know, they like this guy. You know, he knew everybody in town. And I would say, look, give that a shot. Give it a shot. I mean, what can it hurt? I mean, you know, you would build your name on all these successes, all these kids that are in school. If you would just, you either teach them at home, you know, or you just tutor them. You can have more than one kid. You know, you just negotiate a fee with the parents, and you can go to their home, which would be good for the parents, because that would be like, oh, I got you know, not just a tutor, but I got somebody babysitting, okay, because they're at the house, and I can go to work, and at least the kid's not there by himself or herself, you know. But you know what I'm saying? You could just do that, maybe that would alleviate some of the apprehension, okay, about teachers. When they see that, you know, look, if you don't want your kid being in a public school because you think it's unsafe or something like that, try this. Okay, now I know it's not a new idea. I mean, it's sort of been a thing that's been floating around in different parts of the country, or even the world for that matter, for a long time. Tutors. But I think there's a potential industry there for that to be. You know, certainly that way the parent can vet you when you come by. They can sit and talk with you, find out if they're comfortable with you or not. If they think, you know, you're too young or something, whatever problems they might have that they would bring up at a school board meeting, they would have the chance to dodge that problem. If they, you know, look at you and talk to you and get to know you or something, and after a time you build a rapport, then they might say, you know what, I think this person would be a good teacher for my kid. I think I'll hire him or her, whatever. Okay? I think that would be a good thing. That way the parents have less to bitch about because they're the ones that chose the kid. And the teacher doesn't have to deal with a fucking school board. They don't have to deal with the school. And, you know, whatever problems that happen between kids while they're in school, like fights and, you know, whatever. You know what I'm saying, okay? That way the parent would feel better. Now, there's a downside to that, and I met someone who was a result of that downside, okay? Met this young fellow when he was 15 years old, okay, being homeschooled. And the reason for that, well, I don't think I should say, because it's, you know, it's a private matter for him. But needless to say, you know, it wasn't easy for him to be around other people because he was different. But the parents took him out of the school, and they raised him or taught him at home. Now I see this who was a kid then. Now he's 45 years old or something, you know, and I notice now he's lacking in social skills. He still has a lot of that 15-year-old sort of mentality there. He's smart as all whip, okay, smart as hell, but he's so dumb when it comes to dealing with people. And he you know, he has a history of having problems trying to form relationships and stuff with people. And, you know, there is a downside to that. So even though if you choose to have a tutor come by to teach your kid, you should also encourage your kid to mingle with other kids, you know, at a playground, or have them meet kids somewhere, you know, like at the store or something like that. Have them make friends, okay? Don't let them get in the habit of on the damn cell phone all day long, because that's not meeting people. I think I went into a video here prior about the two-dimensional aspect of texting one another, okay? You don't get to see people face-to-face and understand people's reactions, emotions, and stuff like that, okay? You need to learn that experience, that if I say this, they're not going to like it. It's easy to say stuff online. You got keyboard courage when it comes to being online and texting people, because you never have to see the result of what you say to somebody. So for kids, it's very important that they put aside the phone and the texting and actually do these face-to-face things. You know, having them get into arguments and fights is healthy, because, again, they're learning. Even though it's not something we want to see, they're still learning, okay? Many times, you know, I got punched in the nose or something like that when I was in school. Didn't like it, but I walked away with a little bit more understanding of human nature that way. And you see, it is a learning experience, and parents don't like to see that, but they have to understand. When they were kids, they probably got into fights like that and stuff, okay? So we all understand, all right? But those experiences are just as healthy as learning your math and your history and your, you know, sciences and stuff like that, okay? Just as important. Social skills are important too, because if you try to get somebody out there to work in a job and they got no social skills, what boss is going to hire them? It doesn't matter how smart they are. Okay? If you can't get along with your fucking coworkers, you know, you're just going to create more problems than solve any. So, yeah, there's that. So that's kind of like my suggestion about, you know, what other alternatives there could be is for some of these teachers, if you've had enough of dealing with the school boards and the school system, just try that. Try tutoring for hire, okay? Put your name in however they do it today, online or in the yellow pages or whatever. Okay, I'm still an old school thinker, but just get your name out there, okay? Build a reputation. When you got a community that knows you and says, yeah, he or she taught my kid did well, graduated and all that stuff, okay? That means something. Then you won't have to sell yourself anymore because people will know that's the person I want, okay? And before you know it, maybe other teachers will see that and say, you know what, it ain't such a bad thing. She started this thing and now she's everywhere. She's got all kinds of clients. She's in high demand, okay? And, you can ask more and more as time goes on and you probably get more. You'd probably get more money that way than you would a week-to-week paycheck, than what you're getting working at a school. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Things like that can be negotiated with the client you have. Okay, and you certainly don't have to be stuck with just one client at a time. You could, if you have the time, you can do 2 kids or something. Like you say, like today we're going to just do English, and you can do that for all the kids. The next day we're going to do math, and you do that for all the kids. You know what I'm saying? You can really expand on that. You can tailor that education method to your own liking. You don't have to follow the guidelines of the ever-changing government or the ever-changing school board. You can make up your own guidelines, the guidelines that work, where success has proven, okay? And if you come across a kid that's very, very disruptive and doesn't, you could say, look, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. You're going to have to fix this kid before I come back and you know what I'm saying? They can't do anything then, okay? Because, you have the ability to walk away because you still have all these other kids that you can teach and stuff like that. But you can just walk away from the trouble ones, because you figure out the parent's asking me too much. They're asking me to raise the kid as well as educate, and I can't do both, So I'm just going to pick the kids I feel I can work with, and I'll leave the ones I can't behind. Let somebody else take that one. Maybe they can have a special kind of teacher that, has the ability to do a lot of different things other than just educate, maybe to teach the kid how to behave. Teach them some sort of manners of rights and wrongs or something like that. You could have teachers that specialize in certain things, that are tutors that go around and help the kids, the troubled ones, It certainly would be a good way to find out which parents are actually doing their job and which aren't. You know what I'm saying? Because, kids, they have a habit of yakking and telling, spilling their guts all the time because they don't have the ability yet to understand what not to say, So, you know what I'm saying? Think about that. And if it, like, especially during the summer, because I know a lot of teachers, they got to pick up a job during the summer because, they go through all that time where they're not working and they need money still. They got bills to pay. Maybe during the summer you can try that out. For the kids that are having hard times and they didn't quite get a very good grasp, they might have passed, but they didn't pass very well, okay? Offer them. Go to your parents and tell them that I can help you during the summer. We can get you caught up for next year. We'll just reinforce everything that I taught you. We can do that for the summer. And all you got to do is pay me X amount for whatever you want. And see see how that pans out. Try it. Just try it. Okay? Just give it a shot. For God's sake, you're young. You can take chances, right? So, I mean, geez. If I was a teacher, that's what I'd do. I'd give it a shot. I mean, I'm not a teacher, but, hell, what the hell, I would say, you know what? I'm going to give that a try and see what happens, And the reason why I say that, my father, he used to fix televisions and VCRs. This is, of course, the 80s, right? But he taught himself how to do that with an online course. And a guy that was also in that field, he worked with him for a while and he picked up things from him. He got pretty damn good at his job. And about price, he was in high demand. And in a very short time, 5, 6, 7 years, you know, people were bringing all kinds of stuff to him to fix. And, you know, he didn't work for a company. He worked, you know, out of home, you know, out of his house. He worked at home, you know, and he made a damn good name for himself, you know, for as long as he did it. Of course, when everything went to flat screens and, you know, and whatnot, he said, okay, that's enough. Because what happened was the cost of fixing things like that was as much as buying a brand new one. So we started living in a throwaway society. So people like my father were just kind of disappeared into, you know, whatever you want to call it. And so that's how that ended. But for, you know, for doing stuff on his own, you know, really got him by, you know, a lot. So anyway, that's it for today. So I hope everybody has a great Mother's Day for tomorrow. So subscribe, comment, share, keep your ears open for any health-related issues. And be a community, people, and especially in these times, as I always say, we got to have backups to backups, and our backups are each other. When our government agencies fail us, we are left holding the bag. So we got to be ready for that because it's coming. So I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.